Is there an impact of what pathway you would be advising based on the passport of the person that you're advising? Does it change based on passports or where people are from? Is there kind of a potential policy that has been talked about, might be on the cards and would have a big impact, a negative impact on a lot of people? These things, they're not static. They're constantly changing and evolving, right? So can you go into a little bit of detail about that process and why people need to always be up to date, or how people could be informed about these things? Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sue Me Later. I'm joined here today by immigration specialist Krish Neil Ram. Krish is practicing at Unique Migration and has dealt with all sorts of migration matters. And today we're talking about how students choose their courses, the different things that kind of come to their mind, all of the different myths that are spread around, all of the rumors, and we're here to demystify all of that. So Krish, welcome to the show and great to have you here.
Thanks, Hayder. Thanks for having me. One of the biggest myths I see dealing with students and international students especially is the concept of I study something that's in the market and is in demand, and I'll get PR. I have many clients who follow the same advice and come to me at different stages of their progression. In one such case, I had a client who had spent years, maybe 4 or 5 years studying technology qualifications, progressing through the technology qualification. And then after speaking to their friends and seeing how the occupation had been marked in the market, they decided midway through to abandon their studies and choose to study education. They spent a lot of money on their tuition. Honestly, they did everything right, but they came to me at the end of it all and they said, where is my pathway? Where's my PR pathway? The reality was there was no pathway for them.
Okay, so hold on, let's rewind a little bit here, because we're talking about international students, they're studying their courses, and typically, I guess, well, not typically, but I guess there's a portion of students that are looking for a pathway to PR after they finish studying. And, that influences the choices that they make, maybe the courses that they study, and what they can hear from different people can, I guess, confuse people. And that the prerequisites for getting a PR, these things, they're not static. They're constantly changing and evolving, right? So can you go into a little bit of detail about that process and why people need to always be up to date, or how people could be informed about these things?
A lot of people get their information through social media these days, and social media is not developed based on your personal circumstances. What works for one person doesn't work for other people. And until you have someone who is looking through your CV, your qualifications, your background, you can't build a case on how you can get permanent residence. For many people, there are minute things they can do, and what they need to do is identify those things as early as possible, because before you can get permanent residence, you need to have a clear idea of how you need to get there. For some people, it might be through their qualifications. Other people, it could be through their employer. Other people, it could be through their dependents or their partners. But having a professional go through each of these items, going through your credentials, all of this will help you in the long run to identify your pathway with clarity as early as possible.
What I've taken away from that is everybody has unique circumstances, and somebody needs to look at those individual circumstances, because no two people are the same. No two people have the same experience, or have come from the same place, or have studied the exact same things, or worked at the exact same places. So everyone's got that unique set of circumstances. So that means there's no two pathways, I guess, that are the same, or generic advice that you can kind of give to everyone.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one person could have just that little bit more experience, which puts them into a different type of bracket. Other people could be studying a particular course that could open up other pathways. It's about going to a professional who can look at your circumstances and give you that clarity at the start, rather than following generic advice, following social media accounts that give you a rosy sense of your options without looking at it in depth.
Okay, so can you give me an example of a case where somebody has done that or has been misinformed, or what are the common kind of myths or problems that you see out there?
So one of the biggest myths is really around, let's take my earlier example, this person who is now completing an education course. Education and early childhood care, primary schooling, and secondary schooling is very in demand across Australia. In every state, it's really in demand. But what a lot of people don't understand is that the market since COVID in Australia, there's a lot of students who are progressing to graduate work visas, and they're on a graduate work visa waiting to be invited by the government. They haven't got employer sponsorship and they're just waiting to be invited. Some of them have been here for 3-4 years and they're building up their point scores, which mean that the points you need have gone from a reasonable point score of around 70 to 80 points all the way up to 85 to 90 points. To receive a point score that high, you need to maximize or optimize your points in a really, really difficult way. You need to be able to get the highest points in English. You need to have that employment experience. And some people just don't realize that before it's really too late and they have to consider other options or leave the country. Having that advice upfront gives you an option to, at that stage upfront, decide whether it's a viable pathway for you.
That early childhood care, those teaching kind of roles, great if you got in 4 years ago, but now there's a long list of people, I guess, that are going to get invitations to PR before you, and it might not be the best thing for you to enter into right now. Is that what you're saying?
It really depends on your circumstances. If you have the circumstances, the evidence, the employment experience, and the runway to have the states invite you, you can very well be invited. But if you're sitting on 70 points, perhaps not the best English or no work experience, the likelihood that you're going to get invited is very low. And at that point, you need to start thinking about how you can optimize your points or speak to a professional to kind of guide you through other steps and other options.
And are there any particular courses that you're recommending at the moment, or is there any particular pathways you think that are more popular than others?
Most trade courses are a good option for people who are ready and willing to take on that trade and work in that trade for at least 1 to 2 years. I mention these trade courses because they are still on lower points. I'm talking about carpentry, plumbing, air conditioning, technicians. They're still on very low points, and you can get invited on, say, 70 to 75 points in certain states.
Is this a recent development when it comes to getting trades in, or is this something that's been going on for a while?
It's been going on for a while, and perhaps it's because some of these occupations like plumbing, like air conditioning technicians, they're not as popular as people who undertake technology occupations or nursing or secondary schooling occupations.
Is there an impact of what pathway you would be advising based on the passport of the person that you're advising? Does it change based on passports or where people are from, or is that a factor that's not really taken into consideration?
We don't usually need to take it into consideration unless there are options such as the person is coming into Australia on a temporary stay, a visitor stay. Some nationalities have those bilateral agreements that allow them to come into Australia for temporary stays. I'm talking British nationals, Canadian nationals, US nationals. Other nationalities may not have that temporary stay, But when it comes down to temporary visas and permanent residents, we don't usually look at their nationalities. Yeah.
In terms of the occupation list and the pathways people are looking at, how often is that changing? And does that change your advice that you're giving to your current clients? You know, if you have a current client on foot and maybe that list changes, does that person need to then start adapting at that point?
They do. I think that a lot of the times you have different points of the year where you do need to reassess your circumstances. I tell my clients every 6 months you should be reassessing your pathway. It doesn't mean that your pathway has become unviable. It just means you're working towards that pathway. You're taking those small steps that would get you there, and you continue to work towards them. Sometimes what could be a viable pathway now, after July, could be even more increasingly viable. You could find immigration laws change all the time. They almost change weekly. If you follow the right instruments and legislation, you'll see that the laws change all very quickly. So just being aware of that fact and being aware of making sure that you have this, you're taking the steps you need to optimize your profile will put you ahead of a lot of people.
Yeah, I just want to kind of go over that point, which is how often the laws change or how often the practice directions change in immigration space. Obviously, I cover a whole range of different practice areas, and I talk to practitioners all the time about what happens in their practice spaces. But, you know, I wouldn't say that, you know, there's constant changes, for example, in the criminal law area or in the family law area, or with commercial disputes, or, you know, there are changes, and it might be something that happens maybe once a year or once every few years. And those changes normally kind of, they're a big shock to the industry because people don't really like change. People can't adapt to change. But you're saying that the changes come in quickly and frequently in immigration space. First, I just want to confirm that that's correct. And secondly, I wanted to kind of get your idea around why that happens and why you think it's different in that space.
Yeah, we do see a lot of change in the immigration space simply because of how politically sensitive the area is. There's a lot of media attention and political attention to the amount of migration in Australia and whether Australia has the right settings in terms of allowing temporary residents in, allowing permanent residents in, and allowing refugees, all sorts of categories. And because of that political sensitivity, there is a consistent stream of changes. We see those changes because there's differences in the government's approach. And we also see those changes that are developing over time. Over time, the policies kind of are becoming more advanced. They're developing based on increased technological advancements at the Department of Home Affairs and the way that they approach net migration, net overseas migration, which is currently at, you know, very historic levels in Australia. Those changes are all designed to ensure the programs are working, the integrity of the programs, ensure people aren't fraudulently coming in, but also ensure that the settings are politically defensible and also capable of ensuring that the community is satisfied that their loved ones can come in, but there's not an influx of people that can't be housed or can't be supported.
So I understand that there's going to be a constant tweaking of the funnel, what we're letting in, how many people, what type of people, you know, and trying to get that balance right. And arguably, we're never going to get that balance right, because someone's always going to be upset about that balance. There's never going to be like a perfect settings, let's say, of, yeah, this is a good amount, this is not a good amount, this is the right type, this is not the right type. I don't think we're ever going to achieve that, because it's something that's so subjective to different people's opinions. It changes with the times, obviously, in terms of the climate of what people are thinking. So I get that, and I get how a change of government would also shake things up. The immigration policy is determined by the federal government, so if there's a change in federal government, you'd expect there to be a change of policy as well. That happens once every 4 years. I guess like the smaller changes and the changes that are constantly occurring, I guess on a monthly basis or every quarter or every half a year, that for me seems a little bit strange, in a way where it's like, why not just set the policy, at the beginning of the term, where it's, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, which is our plan for immigration over the next 4 years. But why does that always have to constantly be tweaked and played with, and the rules have to change? Because of course the repercussions of that and the consequences of that is that it's confusing for everyone. People don't know where they stand. Your clients, that might be students, they might be studying one thing and they might have to change course because one thing that the initial advice that they received is no longer applicable because things have changed. Why do you think it has to be so fluid as opposed to something that can be set right at the beginning of the 4-year term?
I think that the political system we have in Australia has really contributed to that. You have a political party who will be there for a limited period. They'll develop this policy and they may not necessarily see it through. Other times you'll see other political parties come in, inherent policy that may not be suitable with in 2026. So they redevelop the policy, and I think historically there's been a lower priority given to the immigration portfolio, and now it's at a point where it's become a little bit more important to the Australian society. And a lot of these changes, a lot of these legislative changes are all patch jobs. They're not developing a whole kind of new policy. They're just patching things that aren't going right and slowly kind of patching it to a point so that the system can kind of limp on until it gets to a point where it's kind of grown better. I think that's the way that the government's working, which is, satisfying for some people, but it creates a lot of uncertainty because those changes can happen very quickly, and we've seen it happen with little warning.
Is there something that you see happening? It might not be in the immediate future, but is there kind of a potential policy that has been talked about, might be on the cards, and would have a big impact, a negative impact on a lot of people? Is there anything like that you can foresee?
Or what I foresee is, based on my lengthy time in the industry, is the immigration systems are always very cyclical. You have a period of leniency followed by a period of very conservative, high, stringent rules and strict protocols, followed by a lot more stringency. I feel like with a lot of students, we're finding that they're treated quite stringently, even inconsistently, by the government, where they're having their applications refused over very minute reasons, and they're being overturned by the review tribunals. But this is creating a lot of uncertainty for students, it's creating uncertainty for education providers, it's causing uncertainty for the institutions, and all of these organizations have a card to play in this process. So there's going to be a really large lobby or there already is a really large lobby of people complaining that some of these decisions are really inconsistent, and that's going to create a lot of friction at the department, where they're probably going to start looking at it a bit differently and a little bit more leniently. That's my take. It may not happen in the next 6 months, but I expect that we will see it eventually.
So from what I can read in between the lines, currently we're in a cycle where things are interpreted very strictly. It's a very hardline approach, inconsistent at times. So we're in the tough belt tightening measure of the immigration policy, But you see that easing maybe in 6, 12, 18 months, sometime in the future. Is that right?
Yeah, you do see that easing because people get annoyed. People don't like that uncertainty. The system is supposed to run like clockwork. And when people who are usually expected to get approvals don't get them, they complain. Other systems get clogged up. The review tribunals start complaining. And then the government needs to do something about it, and they start looking at all of these settings.
Well, Krish, it's been great to chat. I've learnt a lot. I think it's important to understand where we are, I guess, in the government cycle. It's important to understand that things evolve very quickly and people need to get constant advice. It's not something that you can just get advice at the beginning of your travels or at the beginning of your process of trying to come to Australia. It's something that you always need updates on. And I think people can now understand that because of those government policies that are constantly changing, it's important to always be in contact with somebody that understands what's going on the ground, such as yourself or other good immigration lawyers out there. So you can find Krish at Unique Education and Migration and can answer any of your questions or help you with your visa applications or anything that you need to do with migration. Krish is your man. It's great to have you on the show, Krish, and I hope to chat to you again soon.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone.